Sawyer, Mark Twain. Chapter 1. Aunt Polly hears a faint noise behind her, and turns around just in time to seize a skinny young boy with a mouthful of strawberry jam. "Tom, look at your mouth. If I've told you once, I've told you 40 times to leave that jam alone, or I'd give you a good spanking." Tom escaped Aunt Polly's grasp and jumped the fence. "He's a wild thing, but he's my own dead sister's boy, poor thing, and I don't have the heart to spank somehow." That day, Tom skipped school. Aunt Polly was suspicious, and decided to ask him some questions during dinner. "Tom, it was a bit warm in school today, wasn't it?" "Yes, ma'am." The old lady felt Tom's shirt and gave him a sly look. "But you aren't too warm now, though. Some of us pumped water on our heads. Mine's still damp. See?" "Tom, you didn't have to undo your shirt collar where I sewed it to pump water on your head, did you? Unbutton your jacket." Tom opened his jacket. His shirt collar was securely sewed. But Tom's half-brother Sidney spoke up. "You sewed his collar with white thread, but it's black now." "You're right. I did sew it with white, Tom." But Tom had already left the room. Finally, it was Saturday morning. Tom had to whitewash Aunt Polly's wooden fence. He passed the brush along the top plank and compared the white streak with the rest of the brown wood to be covered. His task seemed endless. He sat down discouraged. Just then, Jim came skipping out with a tin pail. "Say, Jim, I'll fetch the water if you'll whitewash some." "I can't, Master Tom. The old missus told me I have to go and get this water, and not to stop to fool around with anybody. I'll give you a marble." "My, that's a mighty nice marble, I tell you. But, Master Tom, I'm really afraid. And besides, if you help me, I'll show you my sore too." Jim put on his pail, took the marble, and bent over the toe. Just then, Aunt Polly spotted the two boys. It wasn't long before Jim was running down the street with his pail and a sore backside. Tom then began to whitewash the fence with vigor, while Aunt Polly returned to the house with a sense of triumph. Soon, Tom's energy faded. He began to think of the fun he'd planned for this hot Saturday. Just then, Ben Rogers came along imitating a steamboat. Ting-a-ling-ling. Chow 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 chow. An inspiration burst upon Tom. "I'm going swimming, I am. Don't you wish you could? But of course you'd rather work, wouldn't you?" Tom went back to his whitewashing. All I know is it suits Tom Sawyer. Does a boy get a chance to whitewash a fence every day? That made Ben think in a whole new light. Maybe whitewashing was more fun than it looked. "Say, Tom, can you let me whitewash a little?" "Oh, no. I bet it just wouldn't do, Ben. I bet there isn't one boy in 1,000, or maybe 2,000, that can do it the way it should be done. Oh, let me just try, only just a little. If you'll give me a chance, I'll give you my apple." Tom gave up the paintbrush with dread in his face, but joy in his heart. More boys came walking by to tease the whitewashing group, but instead they stayed to join in. Tom traded the next paintbrush for a kite. By afternoon, he had 12 marbles, a tin soldier, 6 firecrackers, a brass doorknob, 4 pieces of orange peel, and a worn-out old window sash. Tom enjoyed his nice, idle time in the shade, and the fence got 3 coats of whitewash. Once the job was done, he politely presented himself to Aunt Polly. "May I go and play now, Aunt?" "What, already? How much have you done?" Aunt Polly went out to sea, and Tom skipped away, released from his chores. As he was passing by the house where Jeff Thatcher lived, he saw a new girl in the garden. He jumped onto the fence in an effort to impress her. She shyly tossed a pansy over the fence and ran inside. Chapter 2. The following Monday morning, as Tom went to school, he saw Huckleberry Finn. Huck was a daring, bold boy who was envied by all the other boys and dreaded by all the mothers in town. As Huck walked closer, Tom noticed he was holding something. What's that? A dead cat. What are dead cats good for, Huck? Good for? To cure warts with. You take the dead cat to the graveyard around midnight where someone evil is buried. Pretty soon, a devil will come. You lift up the dead cat and say, "Devil follow corpse, cat follow devil, warts follow cat." I'm done with you. That'll take care of any wart. I have to see that. Okay. Tonight, then, I reckon the devil will come after old Hoss Williams tonight. When Tom reached the schoolhouse, he strode in briskly as the teacher gave him a stern look. "Thomas Sawyer, why are you late again, as usual?" "I stopped to talk with Huckleberry Finn." "This is the most astounding confession I have ever heard. Go and sit with the girls." With a grin on his face, Tom sat next to the golden-haired girl. He began to steal shy looks at her. "What's your name?" "Becky Thatcher." Tom then wrote something on his slate, and Becky begged to see it. She watched as he slowly uncovered the words until she could read the entire phrase, "I love you." The words made her gasp with surprise. Later that night, as the clock chimed 11, Tom heard the strangest sound in the night air. Meow. Meow. Then he remembered Huck and the dead cat and their appointment at the cemetery. Within a minute, he was dressed and out the window, running to meet Huck. The boys walked into the gloom of the night until they reached the tall grass of the graveyard. "Huck, do you think the dead people like for us to be here?" "Kay, wish I knew. It's awful quiet and gloomy around here." "Shh. You hear that?" The two clung together, their hearts pounding with fear. "Tom, the demons are coming. They're coming, for sure. If we keep perfectly still, maybe they won't notice us at all." Tom and Huck watched as three figures passed by in the shadows of the graveyard. "Hey, those aren't demons, they're humans. One of them sounds like old Muff Potter. I know another one of those voices. It's Indian Joe." The boys watched as three men came to a fresh grave. Their lantern revealed the face of young Dr. Robinson. "Here it is. Hurry. The moon might rise at any moment." Old Muff Potter and Indian Joe began to open the grave. Finally, a spade struck the coffin. Within another minute the men had lifted it out of the grave. "Now the darn thing's ready, Doc. Now, give me another $5, or here it stays." "What do you mean?" "I paid you already. 5 years ago, you drove me away from your father's kitchen. I swore I'd get even with you, even if it took me 100 years. Now I've got you, and you got to settle." The doctor hit Indian Joe so hard he fell to the ground. "Don't you hit him." The doctor grabbed the headboard of the grave and knocked Potter over the head with it. At the same time, Indian Joe stabbed the doctor in the chest with Potter's knife. Now that score is settled. Scared out of their minds, Tom and Huck ran off in the dark. At last, they burst through an open door and fell exhausted on the floor of an old abandoned building. After they left, Indian Joe put the knife in Potter's open right hand. Potter began to stir and moan in pain. The next day, the village was buzzing with the news of Doc Robinson's murder. A knife had been found. It was recognized as Potter's knife. The sheriff came close to Indian Joe, leading Potter by the arm. "Upon my word and honor, I never did it. Tell them, Joe. Tell them. We went out with the doctor to snatch the body, all right. But Muff, he got in a fight with the doc and struck him down dead." Huck and Tom listened in shock as Indian Joe lied to the sheriff about what happened. After that, Ton's conscience disturbed his sleep. Every day or two, He went to the jail window and smuggled as many small comforts to Muff Potter as he could find. Chapter 3. At last, Muff Potter's murder trial started. Tom hung around outside the courtroom with his ears open for news. Potter is guilty for sure, and Indian Joe's testimony is enough to hang him. We have tried this awful crime, beyond all question, upon the unhappy prisoner here before us. We rest our case here. Your Honor, we have a witness to present, Tom Sawyer. Tom got on the witness stand and took his oath of honesty. Thomas Sawyer, where were you on the 17th of June, around midnight? In the graveyard. Then, Tom told the whole story of what he saw that night, as the audience hung on his words. As the doctor went to get the board and Muff Potter fell, Indian Joe jumped in with a knife, and... In the middle of Tom's statement, there was a loud crash as Indian Joe jumped through the window and was gone as quick as lightning. The search parties searched high and low through the night, but Indian Joe could not be found. The days drifted by. One day, Tom had an incredible desire to dig for hidden treasure. He sought out Huck Finn. Where will we dig? After Tom thought for a while, then he spotted the perfect place to dig for hidden treasure. The haunted house that's it. Oh, I don't like haunted houses, Tom. Ghosts hang around and peep over your shoulder and spook you. But Huck, ghosts travel around only at night. They won't stop us from digging there in the daytime. So, the next morning, the two set out again. When they reached the haunted house, there was something so weird and creepy about the dead silence there that they were afraid to go in. They crept slowly to the door and looked in, shaking with fear. After a little while, they got up enough courage to enter the house and slowly climbed upstairs. When they reached the top of the stairs, they heard a sudden noise. Shh, did you hear that? Don't move. They're coming right toward the door. The boys stretched on the floor and looked through the knotholes in the wooden floor. They saw two men enter the room below them. One was dressed like a Mexican. I don't like it. It's dangerous. Dangerous? The Mexican's voice made the boys gasp and tremble. It was Indian Joe. Then, they saw Indian Joe on his knees, digging through the wooden floor with his Bowie knife. His knife hit something hard. It's a box. Help me take it out, and we'll see what it's here for. Joe put his hands inside the box and scooped out a pile of gold coins. It's money. We'll take it to my den, under the cross. The two men slipped out of the house and walked toward the river with the box. After they were out of sight, Tom and Huck ran out of the house and back over the hill toward town. Several days later, Becky Thatcher announced to all the kids in town that she was having a picnic. Suddenly, the treasure and Indian Joe were not as important to Tom anymore. May I stay with Susie Harper rather than coming home late at night, Mother? Okay, but make sure you get your rest, young lady. Tom was quick to take advantage of Becky's freedom. Instead of going to the Harpers after the picnic, why don't you come with me to the widow? Why don't you come with me to the widow Douglas' house? She'll have ice cream. That sounds wonderful. They boarded the ferry boat and floated 3 miles outside of town before it stopped. Everyone rushed ashore for the feast. After a grand meal, Tom was ready for some adventure. Who's ready for the cave? All the kids got up, and after lighting candles, they entered the main passage of the cave. Everyone had so much fun slipping through the small passages of the cave they didn't find their way out until night had fallen. In the excitement, no one realized that Tom and Becky were still in the cave when the ferry returned to town. The next morning, Mrs. Thatcher sat next to Mrs. Harper at church. Is my Becky going to sleep all day? Your Becky? Why, she didn't stay with us last night. Mrs. Thatcher turned pale and sank into the pew just as Aunt Polly passed by. Good morning, Mrs. Harper. I've got a boy that's turned up missing. I think my Tom stayed at your house last night. He didn't stay with us. Within a half an hour, 200 men were pouring toward the cave. But, after a long search, the search party found only a girl's ribbon. Chapter 4. Back in the cave, when the hide-and-seek began, Tom and Becky wandered down a dark, winding tunnel, walking along and talking. Tom squeezed his body into a small space behind a waterfall, and used his candle to illuminate it for Becky. "Becky, come this way. We're lost. We're lost. We never can get out of this awful place. Cheer up, Becky, and we'll keep trying to find our way out." Time passed as they wandered along, hopeless. They came to a spring and decided to stop and rest. Tom fastened his candle to the wall with clay. "Becky, can I tell you something serious?" "I think so." "Well, then, we must stay here, where there's water to drink. That little candle is our last one. Maybe everyone's searching for us now, Tom." "I think maybe they are." "I hope so." The two watched the bit of candle melt slowly away before their eyes, until they were covered in complete darkness. Suddenly, there was a sound like a faint shout, far in the distance. "It's them. They're coming. Come on, Becky. We're all right now." They moved slowly through the darkness. They had to be careful of many pits and holes in the floor of the cave. Soon they came upon a gig hole and had to stop. Tom lay down on the floor of the cave and reached as far down as he could. He couldn't feel the bottom. He looked below, and saw a flickering light as a figure passed by. Tom gasped as he realized it was Indian Joe, still dressed like a Mexican. He drew his head back quickly before Joe spotted him. "There's no way we can pass over this. We'll have to wait here until they come." After a little while, Tom yelled out until he almost lost his voice, but he was answered only by silence. The two waited and waited, but they could hear no more signs of life. As they waited in the dark, the time dragged on and on. Eventually, they fell asleep, only to wake up later starving, tired, and full of fear. "I'm so hungry." Tom decided to leave Becky behind as he explored the cave for an exit. He found a kite string in his pocket and unraveled it to trace his path. He went as far as his kite string would reach. He was about to give up and turn back when he spotted a far-off speck of light. He felt his way toward it. Eventually, he made his way to the source of light and saw that it was a hole to the outside. He pushed his head and shoulders through the hole and saw the grand Mississippi River flowing by. He'd finally found a way out. Tom went back and got Becky and helped her out. When they walked to the river, some men came by on a small boat and kindly took them aboard. 2 weeks after the rescue, Tom stopped by the Thatcher home to visit Becky. "Well, Tom, do you think you'll ever want to go in that cave again?" "It wouldn't bother me at all, Judge. Nobody will ever get lost in that cave anymore. I had its entrance sealed shut." Tom's face turned as white as a sheet. "What's the matter, boy?" "Oh, Judge, Indian Joe's in that cave." Within a few minutes, a dozen small boats of men were floating up the Mississippi, on their way to capture Indian Joe. When the cave door was unlocked, the men laid eyes on the dead body of Indian Joe, stretched on the ground. He had starved to death. The morning after Indian Joe's funeral, Tom and Huck had a serious talk. "Huck, that money we saw Indian Joe taking from the haunted house is in that cave. Will you go in there with me and help get it out?" "You bet I will, as long as we can find out way to it and not get lost. We'll need some bread and meat, and a small bag or two, and 2 or 3 kite strings, and plenty of candles." That afternoon, the boys were rowing their way down the river to collect their treasure. Tom stood up in the boat and pointed into the distance along the riverbank. He spotted one of the large white marks he had made near the hole in the cave so he could find it again. "See that white spot up there? That's one of my marks. The boys stopped the boat on the riverbank and climbed up to the small hole in the side of the cave. We've got it now. Of course, there's got to be a gang, Tom Sawyer's gang. Doesn't it sound great, Huck? It's perfect, Tom. I think it's better than being a pirate. Now I'll show you something, Huck. Tom held his candle out over the drop-off where he had spotted Indian Joe. Look as far around the corner as you can. Do you see that? There on the big rock in the distance. Someone drew it with candle flame. Tom, it's a cross. Tom, let's get out of here. Indian Joe's ghost is around here for sure. Indian Joe's ghost isn't going to come around where there's a cross. Tom went first down the steep hill, using his pocket knife to cut small steps in the clay hill as he went down. Look over here, Huck. There are footprints and some candle wax in the clay on one side of this rock, but not on the other sides. I bet you the money is under this rock. I'm going to dig in the clay. Tom had not even dug 4 inches into the soil before his knife struck wood. Hey, Huck. Did you hear that? The 2 boys took out the boards and found a large tunnel beneath them. Tom crawled into the tunnel on hands and knees with Huck following closely behind. They turned the short curve when Tom discovered something. Wow, Huck. Look over here. It was the treasure box, along with an empty powder keg and a couple of guns in leather cases. At last. We're rich, Tom. The boys quickly scooped the money out of the box and dropped it into the bags they brought along. Chapter 5. The boys set off on the river and landed downriver shortly after dark. They put their bags of treasure into a wagon and carefully covered them with rags before they left. When they reached Welshman Jones' house, they stopped to rest. Hello? Who's that? It's us. Huck and Tom. Come along with me, boys. You're keeping everybody waiting. I'll haul the wagon for you. You got bricks in it or old metal? Old metal. As Jones quickly pulled the wagon, the boys wondered what the big hurry was about. What's the rush? Never mind. You'll see when we get to Widow Douglas' place. When they reached the house, Mr. Jones left the wagon near the door. The boys were pushed into the drawing room. Almost everyone from the village was there, ready to greet them. I stumbled on Tom and Huck right at my door, so I just Come with me, boys. She took them to one of the bedrooms where 2 suits were laid out neatly on the bed. Now wash and dress yourselves. Here are 2 new suits of clothes. Come down when you are clean and presentable. Huckleberry, from now on you'll have a home under my roof, and when I can spare the money, I'll start up a business for you. Huck's got money, ma'am. He's got lots of it. Tom ran outside, and soon came back dragging the 2 heavy sacks of treasure. He poured the mass of yellow coins up on the dining table, while everyone gasped in amazement. After Tom told the story of the treasure, Judge Thatcher counted the coins. These boys are rich. There's just a little over $12,000 here. The story of Tom and Huck's treasure created a great stir of gossip in the little village. Wherever the boys went, they were stared at with admiration and amazement. But there was a price to be paid for Huck's good fortune. While living with Widow Douglas, he was forced to be civilized, dress up for dinner, and eat with a knife and fork. He bravely put up with this misery for 3 weeks, until one day he went missing. The people of the village searched high and low. They even dragged the river for his body. Luckily, they didn't find it. Tom decided to try a search of his own. He looked around some empty hogsheds behind the old abandoned slaughterhouse, and there he found Huck, hiding in the shadows. Huck. Widow Douglas is so worried. Don't talk about it, Tom. Widow's good to me, but I can't live like that. She made me wash and comb my hair so hard my eyes water. Plus, I have to wear these uncomfortable clothes that smother me. I can't catch flies. I can't chew tobacco, I can't go fishing, everything's so awful. I just can't take it anymore. You know, Tom, just as we'd gotten guns, treasure, and a cave hideout, this foolishness had to come up and spoil it all. Look, Huck. Being rich isn't going to keep me back from being a robber. Really? Are you sure, Tom? Sure as I'm sitting here. But, Huck, we can't let you into the gang if you aren't respectable, you know. You wouldn't shut me out, would you, Tom? Huck, I wouldn't want to, and I don't want to, but what would people say? Tom Sawyer's gang pretty low characters in it. They'd mean you, Huck. Huck was silent for a while, thinking about what Tom had said. Well, if you'll let me belong to the gang, then I'll go back to the widow's house for a month and see if I can stand it. All right, Huck. Come on, and I'll ask the widow to let up on you a little. Will you? If she'll let up on the toughest things, I'll be okay. When are you going to start the gang so we can turn robbers? Oh, right away. We'll have to swear to stand by each other, even if we're chopped to bits, and we need to swear out oath by midnight in the loneliest, most awful place you can find. And you've got to swear on a coffin and sign it with blood. Now, that one is something. I'll stay with the widow till I rot, Tom. And if I get to be a tough old robber, I bet she'll be proud she took me in out of the cold.